Greetings everyone. Welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we are going to analyze the Hindu dated 11th of January 2020. Displayed on the screen is a list of articles that we are going to discuss today. Timestamping for the same has been provided in the description of the video. Let's begin. Page number 15 of today's newspaper talks about a very important news which focuses on RBI chalks out financial inclusion strategy for 2024. The subheading of the article reads, it aims at universal mobile access to financial services. Now, before understanding the financial inclusion strategy of the RBI, let's first understand the importance of financial inclusion. Now, we know that governments across the world are trying to ensure social and economic development of its citizens. One of the ways to ensure this is the promotion of financial inclusion. Once financial inclusion is promoted, it leads to economic growth and development all across the world. At the same time, it is important because it leads to boost in job creation and it also reduces vulnerability to economic shocks. At the same time, this also leads to the increase in the investment of human capital. And human capital is the greatest asset for any country or nation. And hence, most of the countries are now trying to ensure more and more financial inclusion for their citizens. The importance of financial inclusion is also highlighted in the Sustainable Development Goals as presented by the United Nations. In 7 Sustainable Development Goals, financial inclusion is a key enabler, and hence understanding is important from the perspective of the examination as well. As far as this topic is concerned, this will be covered under economy and it will be important from the perspective of prelims as well as mains. As a subtopic, it will be covered under growth and development. Now let's understand the idea of financial inclusion. In order to understand the meaning of financial inclusion, let's focus on a definition which was given by Raghuram Rajan Committee on Financial Sector Reforms. According to the committee, financial inclusion refers to universal access to a wide range of financial services at a reasonable or a very nominal cost. At the same time, one should not get confused with financial inclusion with banking only. It is much beyond banking, as other financial services like insurance and equity products are also important part of financial inclusion. The idea is, what is the importance of such financial inclusion? Financial inclusion has a multiplier effect, and when you talk about multiplier effect, it leads to boost in economic growth, reduction of poverty and income inequality. Now, financial inclusion of women is also a very important aspect as it leads to gender equality and women empowerment. So, in this context, financial inclusion has multiple effects, be it economic, political, and social. Since we are talking about the issue of financial inclusion, it is also important here to know what is the extent of financial inclusion that we see in our country. Now, this is reflected from a single fact that around 58% of households are availing banking services. Now, this figure of 58% looks low, but in comparison to the 2001 census, this figure has improved considerably. Now, this also leads our discussion to the topic of financial exclusion as well. Now, when we talk about financial exclusion, a majority of the people are financially excluded because they lack financial literacy. At the same time, bank and other financial institutions are more urban area centric, and hence the penetration of banks and other financial agencies is lacking in the rural areas. At the same time, there is lack of awareness in people because of lack of education. At the same time, availing financial services requires documents as well. When people are poor and illiterate, they cannot furnish the documents to avail such services. At the same time, there has always been an issue of poor quality of services rendered by financial institutions or agencies, and hence these are the primary reasons for financial exclusion of people. Now, the government understands the importance of financial inclusion, and there are various steps taken by the government over a period of time to improve financial inclusion for our citizens. First and foremost, we have seen the nationalization of banks, first the big one in 1969 and the second in 1980. Now, this nationalization of banks was done so that penetration of banks in rural areas can be increased. At the same time, government has taken various other measures like setting up of regional rural banks. It has also come up with the norms of priority sector banking. Recently, Prime Minister Jan Dhan Yojana, setting up of payment bank and small financial banks, and the launch of UPI and BHIM apps. Now, all these steps were taken so that banking and other facilities can be expanded to all the areas of country. So, in this context, it is important for us to understand the strategy of financial inclusion as adopted by the RBI. Now, the RBI's strategy to ensure financial inclusion is based on three basic parameters. First, promotion and coming up of financial inclusion policies at regular interval, and this will be done by identifying the gaps in the previous strategy and to fill gaps with newer policy. At the same time, it is important to inform the customer about financial planning, and hence financial literacy is a very important aspect of RBI strategy. The last but not the least is the customer trust in the entire system, and this trust will be strengthened by the factor of grievance redressal. So, in this case, we can see through this image that when we talk about financial inclusion triad, it focuses on financial inclusion policies, then it talks about financial literacy initiatives, and last is the customer grievance redressal framework. Through these three basic parameters, RBI is trying to improve financial inclusion within the country. Now, let us focus on the strategic pillars of financial inclusion. Now, it is very evident to us that to make financial services available, accessible, and affordable to all citizens in a safe and transparent manner to support inclusive and resilient multi stakeholder led growth, we need to focus on these pillars. These pillars are universal access to financial services. Second important aspect is providing basic bouquet of financial services. Third is access to livelihood and skill development. Fourth is financial literacy and education. Fifth would be customer protection and grievance redressal. And last would be effective coordination. At the same time, all these six pillars will be based on leveraging technology and adopting multi-stakeholder approach for sustainable financial inclusion. Now let us understand all these pillars briefly. At the same time, we need to understand that technology is a very important aspect of achieving the goals of financial inclusion. So, when we talk about universal access to financial services, it has to be based upon digital network infrastructure to all financial service outlets. In this regard, digital financial infrastructure should be set up by all banks as well as other non bank entities such as fertilizer shops, offices of local government, common service centers, education institutions, etc. This will promote efficiency, transparency in the services offered to the customers. Now, the second important strategic pillar of financial inclusion is providing basic bouquet of financial services. As already mentioned, opening a bank account is a very small portion of financial services. The person must be in a position to acquire credit, can invest in pension and insurance, and it should also give an opportunity to invest in a safe and transparent manner. In this fashion, these basic bouquet of financial services will basically ensure trust in the customer and will give them opportunity to expand their financial inclusion in various products. Third important aspect is access to livelihood and skill development. Now, it can be highlighted from the fact that financial inclusion will include both access to livelihood as well as skill development. The financial inclusion that the government is targeting must empower people with information of government initiatives to promote skill building, such as National Rural Livelihood Mission, PM Kaushal Vikas Yojana, and many such other schemes. So, this again is a very important aspect of financial inclusion. Next is financial literacy and education. Now, there is a need to prepare financial literacy modules with a specific target audience orientation, which can be focused at children, adults, women, retired, and elderly people, etc. These modules can be in the form of audio, video, booklet, and should be made available for understanding the product and process involved. availability of such financial literacy and education will boost the financial inclusion in a significant fashion. Next is customer protection and grievance redressal. Now, the financial sector is facing growing risks such as cloning, hacking, phishing, malware, etc., which increases the vulnerability of digital financial users. Hence, in order to improve trust of the users, there is a need to set up effective grievance redressal mechanism at different levels. Data protection and cybersecurity also needs to be addressed under the customer protection framework. And this will inspire confidence in the financial sector and will include more people in the ambit of financial inclusion. Last important aspect is effective coordination. Now, in financial inclusion, there are various key stakeholders, which includes government, regulators, financial service providers, telecom service regulators, skill training institutes, etc. So there is a very valid need of focused and continuous coordination among all these key stakeholders. This will ensure that customers are able to use the services in a sustainable manner. So these are the major points of the strategy which is adopted by RBI for ensuring financial inclusion by the year 2024. Yesterday was a very important day in the history of India, where the Supreme Court has criticized the government for curbing basic rights in Jammu and Kashmir. At the same time, Supreme Court has highlighted that Section 144 is not a tool to suppress opinion. Now, this topic has been adequately covered in today's newspaper. It has been covered as part of editorial on page number 10, which reads eloquently reticent. At the same time, on page number 1, it reads Supreme Court tells government to review orders curbing basic rights in Jammu and Kashmir. On page number 12, there is a small article which highlights that Supreme Court is of the opinion that Section 144 is not a tool to suppress opinion. In this context, this news is very important from the perspective of polity and governance, and it is important for prelims as well as for the mains examination. It is expected that you will follow this news in detail and will prepare your notes. At the same time, you are also expected to revise these notes at regular intervals. Now let's first understand the context of the news. Supreme Court has declared that fundamental right of freedom of speech and expression as guaranteed in Article 19(1)(a) and right to carry on trade or business using internet are constitutionally protected. It is in this context Supreme Court has given its observation about curbing basic rights in Jammu and Kashmir. At the same time, Supreme Court has highlighted that Section 144 cannot be used to suppress opinion of the people. In this context, let's try to understand this news from the various points of observation. Now let's first understand what Supreme Court has observed about the entire situation or scenario. First and foremost, Supreme Court asked the government to produce the basis for the curbs that were imposed after internet was suspended in the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. At the same time, it is important to understand that the government could not provide any kind of basis or order which was utilized for this particular purpose. Hence, the Supreme Court has criticized the central government for its rash behavior for not producing any kind of basis for the curbs that were imposed on internet. You might be aware of the fact that on 5th of August 2019, the special status of the state of Jammu and Kashmir was abrogated and the new union territories were created by the name of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. So, there was no basis for the suspension of internet services in the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. And hence, Supreme Court has asked the government to review the suspension and also said that any order suspending the internet found to violate the law should be revoked at once. At the same time, Supreme Court has sought information from Home Ministry for the justification and reason for internet shutdown, whether the action was proportionate to imminent threat to law and order. At the same time, Supreme Court has expressed that in this era of information age, internet has gained lot of relevance and hence internet is a means of information diffusion. There should be clear cut guidelines which can be utilized for the internet shutdown, and it cannot be arbitrary in any case. With this, let's move to the understanding part of what kind of procedure does the government follow to suspend internet services in a particular area or a state. Now, when we talk about shutdown of internet services, there are three basic provisions. First, the Information Technology Act of 2000. Second is Criminal Procedure Code of 1973. And the third is the Telegraph Act of 1885. Now, these three laws are utilized for the suspension of internet services in a particular area. Now, in 2017, the government has notified temporary suspension of telecom services Rules 2017 under Section 7 of Telegraph Act to suspend the internet services in a particular area. At the same time, it is important for you to note that before 2017, internet suspension orders were issued under Section 144 of Criminal Procedure Code, which empowered a district magistrate or a SDM or any other executive magistrate to suspend the internet services in a particular area. The use of Section 144 to suspend mobile internet was challenged before the Gujarat High Court in 2015, but the court upheld the power of the magistrate to issue such orders. Now, in the case of this news, it is important for you to understand that shutdown of internet in a particular area utilized these three rules: IT Act of 2000, CRPC Act of 1973, and Telegraph Act of 1885. Now, it is important here to understand that Section 144 of Criminal Procedure Code has also been utilized for shutting down the internet. Now, despite the 2017 rules, the government has often used broad powers under Section 144. Now, we have seen that after the Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019 and the NRC issue, Section 144 has been used many times to suspend internet services in a district or an area. However, it is important to know that no order passed under Section 144 can remain in force for more than 2 months from the date of order unless the state government considers it necessary. Even then, the total period cannot extend to be more than 6 months. And hence, in this context, Supreme Court tried to understand the government's stand on Section 144, which was utilized to suspend internet services in many areas. So, in this context, the Supreme Court recognized that the temporary suspension of telecom services rules 2017 are the only procedures to be followed to suspend internet services and not under the broad law of Section 144 of CRPC. At the same time, the court accepted that there should be an occurrence of public emergency or for it to be in the interest of public safety that internet can be suspended in an area or a state or a territory. Now, it is also very important for us to understand the competent authority according to 2017 rules. Now, according to the rules, in ordinary circumstances, the competent authority would be Secretary to the Ministry of Home Affairs. Similarly, when we talk about the state government, Secretary to the state government in charge of Home Department is the competent authority. At the same time, in unavoidable circumstances, when prior direction is not feasible, an officer not below the rank of Joint Secretary to the Government of India is the competent authority. And it should be noted that this Joint Secretary and above rank officer must be duly authorized by the Union Home Secretary or the State Home Secretary. It is important for you to note that when the officers of Joint Secretary or above, which are authorized by Ministry of Home Affairs, have taken the decision, then this decision must be confirmed by competent authority within 24 hours. And in case such a confirmation has not been obtained in 24 hours, then the order shall cease to exist. Court also clarified that whenever such orders are passed to suspend the internet of a particular area, then reasons for such direction and a copy of such orders shall be forwarded to concerned review committee, and this has to be done latest by the next working day. It is the responsibility of the central government or the state government to constitute the review committee. The review committee shall meet within next 5 working days to assess the situation and the reasons for the suspension of internet services. So, the last thing that we need to understand is the constitution of the review committee for the central government as well as for the state government. In the case of central government, it will be a three-member body in which the cabinet secretary of the central government will act as a chairman. At the same time, Secretary to the Government of India in charge of legal affairs and Secretary to the Government of India, Department of Telecommunication will act as members. So in this way, there will be a three-member body with Cabinet Secretary at the helm. At the same time, the review committee of the state government would have Chief Secretary as chairman, Secretary of Law in charge legal affairs, and Secretary to the state other than Home Secretary as members. So both the review committees would have three members in each case. The decision of the Supreme Court was given yesterday, and hence we expect that in a time to come, this news will develop into more information and knowledge for all of us. In this sense, please stay tuned and try to gather as much of information. As this news is covered in the newspaper much more, we will present our analysis on this issue again. The lead article on page number 10 talks about human rights are not solely an internal matter. In this context, it is very important for you to understand that Austin, who was one of the proponents of sovereignty, focused on one aspect. He was of the view that sovereignty is unquestioned for a country and there would be no influence of any other country. At the same time, as we are living in a globalized world, this has become more of a myth. Now, countries are dependent on each other, and hence, something that can be categorized as an internal matter is a very difficult concept for us to believe. The author highlights the same dilemma for country as well as for readers. It reads, human rights are not solely an internal matter. At the same time, the subheading reads, with the evolution of international law in the last 100 years, the concept of unrestricted sovereignty has weakened. This is where the concept of sovereignty, as put forward by Austin, is shown to lack substance. So, in this context, it is important for us to know what is the trigger of this discussion. Now, the context of this news is very simple. India has recently been criticized by the human rights experts for the violation of human rights, especially on the issue of shutdown of internet in Jammu and Kashmir and handling of protest for Citizenship Amendment Act and Citizenship Amendment Bill. At the same time, the nonchalant attitude of government on the issue of NRC has also been discussed. So these acted as the triggers for human rights expert to question India's human rights credentials. Now, in order to understand the complete story, let's focus on the grounds of the criticism. A group of human rights experts have criticized communication shutdown in the Jammu and Kashmir. This was done in the aftermath of abrogation of Article 370, which changed the status of Jammu and Kashmir. At the same time, Jammu and Kashmir was made a union territory, and according to government, in order to maintain public order and safety and security, the communication has been shut down. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has also expressed concern that the Citizenship Amendment Act is fundamentally discriminatory in nature against a particular community. So this again become a point of criticism for the UN human rights experts. Next important aspect is that in a democratic government, protest is a means of strengthening democracy. At the same time, the way the police handled the entire situation, especially in the Citizenship Amendment Bill and Citizenship Amendment Act, and also for the NRC, highlighted the sorry state of affairs, especially in the case of human rights in India. So these are the three basic grounds which were utilized by the UN human rights expert to criticize India's stand on human rights. Now let us focus on the argument which was given by the author on these issues. Let's first deal the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. Now we know that in the aftermath of dilution of Article 370 and revoking of special status of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, the government has imposed a number of curbs. This includes arrest and detention of political leaders, shutdown of internet, curbs on media freedom, etc. Now, at the same time, According to Article 19 of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, everyone has the freedom of opinion and expression. This also includes freedom to hold opinion without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information through any media. In this context, shutdown of internet is inconsistent with the fundamental norms of necessity and proportionality and a form of collective punishment of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So this is one of the argument which was given by human rights experts, especially at UN. At the same time, it is important for us to know that Supreme Court in a decision yesterday has declared that internet shutdown in Jammu and Kashmir as unconstitutional. So this basically strengthens one of the perspective which was put forward by human rights experts. Another aspect on which we should focus upon is the Citizenship Amendment Act. Now, India is a party to International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the Convention for Elimination of Racial Discrimination. So, any kind of discrimination which is based on racial, ethnic, or religious ground is not welcome according to these covenants. Now, when we focus on these covenants, the Citizenship Amendment Act, according to these human rights experts, is targeted against a particular community. At the same time, there is an issue of safe, regular, and orderly migration which India endorsed in 2018. Besides these covenants, there is Global Compact for Safe, Regular, and Orderly Migration, which India endorsed in 2018. According to this Global Compact, parties should respond to the need of migrants based on human rights and should avoid arbitrary detention. Now, when we talk about Citizenship Amendment Act, when it is coupled with NRC, it seems that arbitrary detention is also part of the picture. At the same time, all these global compact and conventions focus on the principle of equality and non-discrimination. UN human rights experts were of the opinion that the provisions of Citizenship Amendment Act and NRC violate the principle of equality and are discriminatory in nature, and hence India should take action to ensure human rights for its citizens. When the human rights experts have criticized India's stand on Citizenship Amendment Act and shutdown of internet in Jammu and Kashmir, India asserted that both Jammu and Kashmir and Citizenship Amendment Act are its internal matter and there should not be any interference on its sovereign matters. At the same time, as already mentioned, sovereignty is not unrestricted in today's time. There are many treaties, agreements, and covenants which ensure that member countries should make laws while respecting human rights, which are based upon equality and non discrimination. So, these are author's opinion about human rights issues in India. At the same time, the author highlights that there is a weakening of civil society and this civil society has weakened because funding of NGOs has been curbed in the recent past. According to the author, after the amendment of Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, under which registration of about 14,000 NGOs has been cancelled since 2014, and this has led to dissipate dissent in the country. NGOs empower civil society, and if NGOs are weakened through cut of funding, the civil society is also weakened. Now, these are the perspective which author puts across in terms of understanding the scenario. As far as this topic is concerned, this is important more from the perspective of international relations and international organizations. While preparing for the UPSC examination, you need to focus upon a balanced approach and understand issues from both the sides. The author has skillfully put forward the issue of human right violation in the current scenario. At the same time, as a civil service aspirant, it is expected that you will try to understand the perspective of government and try to write a balanced answer. This is an important aspect of any good answer writing process. We have taken this news from page number 8 and it talks about all set for water bird census in Andhra Pradesh. Now, this news is important more from the perspective of environment and ecology, and this news is very relevant from the perspective of the prelims examination. As far as this news is concerned, we will be focusing on three aspects of the news. First and foremost, we will be focusing on the census. Second, we'll be talking about the Koringa Wildlife Sanctuary. And last, we'll be talking about Indian skimmer, which is a water bird species. So, in this context, let's begin. The news that is covered in the newspaper is that annual water bird census will start in Koringa Wildlife Sanctuary and the surrounding wetlands. Now, these wetlands are important and these are named to be Kumbhabhishekam site. Please keep a note of these site as this is important for the presence of wildlife sanctuary as well as presence of Indian skimmer birds. Now, when we talk about this site and Koringa Wildlife Sanctuary, it is basically fed by Gautami and Godavari. And these places are important for the presence of Godavari mangrove. Now, as far as the census is concerned, this census will help in identifying the migratory and the resident bird of the area. And this will help in preparing a better management plan for complex ecosystem that support water bird species. Now, it is important here to highlight that government has initiated many conservation efforts in the area, and hence it is important for the government to identify how well they have performed in this area. So the last point would be identifying the present state and the result of the conservation done in the sanctuary. Now this news also became important because Indian skimmer variety started visiting this area in the last 3 years. Hence, an understanding of the behavior of these birds, their nesting habits is important for the sustainable development of the area, and hence this census is very important. At the same time, we need to know more about Koringa Wildlife Sanctuary. It is located in Andhra Pradesh and is fed by the deltaic branches of Gautami and Godavari rivers at Kakinada Bay. Another important aspect is that extensive mangrove and dry deciduous tropical forests are found in this area. It is important to note that around 35 varieties of plants are found in the area. As far as fauna is concerned, the sanctuary possesses a wide variety of birds because the feed is available in the backwaters of the mangrove forest. During low tide, some of the areas are exposed having small fishes, shrimps and mollusks. This attracts avifauna for feeding. Some critically endangered species like white-backed vulture and long-billed vulture are also found in these areas, and hence this is important more from the perspective of the prelims examination. Now let us understand more about Indian skimmer. As far as Indian skimmer is concerned, it is primarily found in three basic areas in India. First, they are found in Chambal River area. They are also found in the Mahanadi River area, and of late they are found in the wetlands of Godavari as well. So these are the three areas where these birds are basically found. These birds are found mainly in estuaries or in the mangrove forest of rivers. As far as the conservation status of these birds are concerned, these come under the vulnerable category according to the IUCN list. In the current situation, these birds are primarily found in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. At the same time, in the vagrant form, they are also found in Oman and Thailand. So these are the places where these birds are specifically found. At the same time, you need to know that these birds are now primarily found in India and Pakistan. The birds are threatened by habitat loss and degradation, pollution and disturbance by humans. Most colonies of these birds are unprotected, but some lie within natural reserves such as the National Chambal Sanctuary and Koringa Bird Sanctuary, where this census is being taking place. An editorial on the page number 10 of today's newspaper talks about a health emergency. Now, this brings to forth an important announcement by the World Health Organization that polio will continue to remain a public health emergency of international concern for another 3 months. At the same time, you should know that polio has been public health emergency of international concern from 2014 onwards. And this is an extension of this public health emergency by another 3 months. Now, it is important for us to understand that why such an emergency has been declared. The reason for this is very simple. There is a rising risk of international spread of wild polio virus type 1. This decision to extend the emergency by another 3 months was based on the recommendation of emergency committee under the international health regulations that assess the situation in the previous month. 156 new cases of wild polio type 1 have been reported from Pakistan and Afghanistan. And there has been a fourfold increase in the number of reported cases for polio from 2018. And that is the reason why it is categorized as public health emergency of international concern. At the same time, the wild type 1 from Pakistan is also getting exported to Iran and Afghanistan. And the situation is alarming because less number of children are getting vaccinated against polio, especially in Afghanistan, due to security concern. There is another aspect of this public health emergency, as there have been 249 cases of vaccine derived polio cases in 16 countries in 2019. Now, it is important here to know that vaccine derived polio cases occur because the vaccine has not been properly stored or more than desired quantity of vaccine is given to the kids. And this is the reason why there is a health emergency regarding this issue. Now, World Health Organization has been trying very hard to eradicate polio. Now, our country is said to have eradicated polio when not a single case of wild polio virus type 1 is reported for 3 successive years. In this context, it is important for you to know that India became polio free in 2014. Another significant aspect of this news is that India is celebrating 25 years of pulse polio immunization, as this program started way back in 1995. The primary objective of pulse polio immunization program was to ensure 100% coverage of all children against polio. Another noteworthy factor is that Vellore, a town in India, was the first town that was declared polio free in India. Now, the achievement of India to control polio is very important because in 2009, number of polio cases reported in India was highest in the world. At the same time, with the combined effort of people, government and international organization, India has achieved the status of being polio free. In the context of the news, it is important to know more about the polio disease. Now, polio disease or poliomyelitis is more of a viral disease which causes infantile paralysis. This disease is highly contagious and can lead to paralysis, breathing problem, or even death. Now, the problem of polio is increased because vast majority of polio infections present no symptoms at all. And this is the reason why it is difficult to diagnose polio as a disease. At the same time, with the sustained effort of governments across the world and international organizations, the polio as a disease has been eradicated from most of the countries. It is now present in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nigeria. Once Nigeria eradicates polio, then whole of the Africa will be free of polio disease. Now, as already mentioned, polio is highly contagious and it spreads from person to person. At the same time, pregnant women are more susceptible to polio as a disease. And this is also a mechanism through which it is transferred to children as well. In the current scheme of things, there are two types of polio vaccines available. One is inactivated polio virus and second is oral polio vaccine. In the case of inactivated polio virus, it consists of series of injections that start 2 months after the birth and continue until a child is 4 to 6 years old. The vaccine, as the name suggests, is made from inactive polio virus. It is very safe and effective and cannot cause polio. On the other hand, when we talk about oral polio vaccine, it is created from weakened form of polio virus. This version of vaccine of choice in many countries because it is of low cost. easy to administer, and gives an excellent level of immunity. However, in very rare cases, oral polio vaccine have been known to revert to a dangerous form of poliovirus which is able to cause paralysis. As we have seen in the news, over 249 cases of polio which are caused by vaccine have been reported from 16 countries. So this is basically difference between inactivated polio virus and oral polio vaccine. Inactivated polio virus is basically practiced in US and many other developed countries. Now, as already mentioned, polio is highly contagious in nature. The polio virus basically resides in the throat and intestine of the people. It enters the body through mouth and spreads through first contact with feces and droplets from sneeze or cough of an infected person. An infected person may spread the virus to others immediately before and up to 2 weeks after the symptoms appear. So, this is why this disease is very contagious and dangerous in nature. Based on today's discussion, let's take up practice question for the day. Question number 1, which is a UPSC 2019 question. Asiatic loin is naturally found in India. Second is double hummed camel is naturally found in India only. So second statement is incorrect. Third, one horned rhinoceros is naturally found in India only. This is incorrect as it is found in Nepal as well. So only statement 1 is correct and correct answer is option A. Now we have taken this question because we have created a similar question from today's discussion as well. Now pay attention to question number 2. Consider the following statement about Indian skimmer. First, it is found in India only. This is incorrect as it is found in Pakistan as well. Second is, it is a type of water bird which flourishes in fresh water. This again is incorrect because it flourishes in mangrove area. And third is, it is found along all major rivers in India. This is incorrect. It is found in 3 places in India. So by this choice, the correct answer is option D, that is none of the above. Let's take up question number 3. Which of the following statement is related to financial inclusion in India? First, mechanism for grievance redressal. Second, informing and educating people about financial products. And third, provide a wide array of financial services to customers. Now, all 3 statements are correct and hence the correct answer choice is option D. With this, we have come question number 4. Which of the following statement about polio are correct? The first statement, India was declared polio free in 2009. It is incorrect. Actually, in 2009, the incidence of polio across the world was highest in India. Second is, India has celebrated 25 years of pulse polio immunization program. This is correct. The pulse polio immunization program started in 1995 and in 2019 we have celebrated 25 years of pulse polio immunization. So this statement is correct. Third, Nigeria is the only country in Africa which is not polio free. This statement is also correct. By this logic, we know that the correct answer is option B, that is 2 and 3 only.